Welcome everybody. So first of all, I'm super excited uh, to be moderating this panel and hosting this invaluable guests from the EGM network. Maybe I can start with who I am. So I'm Çağıl, one of the co-founders of Bozcaada Caz Festival. And we will be talking about how we can share the intercultural knowledge and presenting the new ways or different ways in the context of jazz and improve our mutual understanding and the unity among society. So we have Nadine from the Berlin Berlin Jazz Fest. Berlin Jazz Fest, so I'm sorry. Artistic Director of Berlin Jazz Fest. Francesca, Office and Event Manager of Europe Jazz Network. And Wim, Artistic Director of Handelsbeurs Concert Hall and the President of the Europe Jazz Network. So we will discuss the jazz as a, means of diversifying, different cultural expression and intercultural approaches as, cultural institutions and organizations, and also, how we approach the artistic programming in our agenda. And why we choose this topic within the festival? So we are in the jazz festival, but we are also creating spaces for different encounters within the program, and we have a section named Exploration, which is the part beyond musical concerts, and we have different kind of events within the festival program, and the idea and the aim behind this approach is to create open spaces for people. And gathering people from different backgrounds and perspective is important for the festival, but of course that's not only for this topic, but we are in this jazz festival, and it's not only about the musical genre, but also how we approach life and how we work. So maybe in this context of this discussion, we can start, who you are, and you're setting the agendas for your own institutions and organizations, and how you approach this context, like intercultural dialogue within your organizations, and then we will improvise from there.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming here, and thanks, Chel and Murat and the Ministry of Tourism for inviting us. It's been a great experience. And so I'm Francesca Cerretani. I come from Italy, and I am the event and office manager of Europe Jazz Network. So I would like just to say a few words about the network itself. So the networks has now around 180 members coming from 34 different countries, mainly European countries, but we have also a few non-European countries, so we are also open to non-European countries, but the majority now is European. So we organize many activities for the professionals. So as a network, we don't organize directly concerts, but all our members organize concerts. And Wim is president of EJN, and Nadine, she was in the board of directors, and she's a member with her festival as EJN. So the main objective of the network actually is to make all our members meet, to help them and support them to create collaborations, to create new projects together, and give them the opportunities to share their experiences, to share their ideas, and to create also something new. And yes, about EJN, we have many activities. Maybe I can talk about this a little bit later, or do you want me to talk about social inclusion, what we do now? Yeah. Okay, so yes, And having such a wide membership, including so many countries, means that we are creating collaborations which people coming from very different cultures, very different approaches also to culture, to music, to how to work. I mean, so there are a lot of differences between each other, but the common ground is our passion and our members' passion for the music, for jazz in particular. But as you said, it's not only about genre, because our members, of course, they are mainly jazz professionals, but they program also different kinds of music. And today it's not easy to say what is jazz and what is not jazz. And one of our main activity is called We Insist, and it's social inclusion activity. And every year, since I think 6 or 7 years, every year we organize a seminar, a face-to-face seminar, and we invite our members, some of our members who are more interested and more active in this field, to meet every year in a different place, different location. And we invite them to speak about their project on social inclusion. And we have seen that in these last 6 years, almost all our members are doing new and very interesting projects about social inclusion. When we talk about social inclusion, the topic is very wide because it includes a lot of subtopics, let's call them. So we are talking about refugees, but not only about refugees. We are talking about disadvantaged people. We are talking about people who are in the outskirts of the cities, and it's the poorer. I mean, it's very wide. The topic is very wide, and we have seen that our members, they do so many interesting projects, and the main focus is that they usually work with the communities, because working on social inclusion is a long process, and the main objective is to include, is the inclusivity, to include the communities, to make them, to make it possible for them to attend the concerts, to attend the cultural life, and which doesn't have to take it for granted. And this is a slow process, but we see that our members are more and more committed to this topic and more interested in also learning from the other members, because every member has a different project, and it's very interesting. So we also have an expert who is a sociologist, that his name is François Materasso. He also wrote a book about several topics on social inclusion, and he is helping us to find the right experts every year to come and speak to our members, to give them some guidelines how to approach the different aspects of this huge topic. And we have seen this year, we organized this seminar in Barcelona during the Jazz IM festival, and we were hosted by one of our members, and it was very interesting. Many of our members were interested. They came. We were around 30 members, and there were 3 professionals coming from also different sectors, because when we talk about social inclusion, we can include also theater, performing arts. We can learn from any kind of cultural fields. And it was also nice also to talk about social inclusion after COVID, because COVID, and I think we all agree with that, COVID unfortunately was really bad in this process of working with communities, because it strengthened the difficulties for some people. And so it's like starting again a new process with the communities which are disadvantaged. But our members are doing a great job. And one last thing is we have an award, which is the EGN Award for Music and Community. So every year when we receive the projects from our members, we, together with the board of directors, we select one of the most outstanding social inclusion projects, and we give it. I mean, it's a symbolic project, but it's very important for EJN and for our members.
Okay. My name is Wim Wabbes. I'm the artistic director of the Handelsbeurs in Ghent in Belgium. And on this topic, I think one of the biggest challenges for us is that we see our cities are changing. The 30% of the population now has an ethnic different background. If you go to the primary school already, it's 50%. And as a cultural organization, it's a challenge to involve those communities in our programming, to be inclusive. And if I'm now focusing on the cultural diversity in the city, how do we tackle this? And one of these experiences has been that it's not just a matter of inviting those communities to your program, it's changing your program so that these communities are interested. And that's why I started in 2001. I had my first visit to Istanbul, your capital, and I met the brother of Ahmed, the great Mehmet Ulu, who introduced me to the Istanbul music scene. We were then in Babylon. There was a positive record series. He introduced me to Husnu, Baba Zula, Taksim Trio, Mercan Dede. And I organized this first festival in my city, inviting the Turkish community and also, of course, the other Belgians who had no Turkish roots. And I remember one of the most fantastic experiences was we had the concert of Taksim Trio, which was at that time kind of the world music scene, a big name. And Mercan Dede, who's a DJ with Canadian roots and Turkish roots, who was also a name that drew on the Belgian audience as well as the Turkish. And so the hall was completely filled, and we had this mixed audience, Turkish, non-Turkish, let's say. And he played an Anatolian song at a certain moment on the record player, and half of the audience started singing, and the other half did not know what was happening. They were singing all together this song, like last night we experienced with Yeni Turku, and because this was the first time in our hall we had this beautiful mix of an audience, and this incredible energetic way of experiencing and the way the Turkish audience always, because they all know the songs of their bands, the way they experience music is completely different as a Belgian audience does. But it learned for me, because then I started working together with a friend, Attila Bakiroglu, who is also from Istanbul, who fell in love with a Belgian woman, went to Ghent and stayed there. So he's very knowledgeable about the music scene in Turkey. And together, I mean, he made me also found out that if you want to change the audience in your hall, you have to take care of the program. It's the program that will invite them to that hall. So I kind of gave away the keys to the hall. As a programmer, I'm an artistic director. Usually you're really tight with the program you make. But then I changed completely. I just gave the keys to Attila. I gave the keys to Jamila Shanouf, who's somebody from the Moroccan community in Ghent. And I asked them to program the venue. And then the Turkish community and the Moroccan community, Maghrebian community came in. We do the same with the Roma community. Martin Balloch, who's a Roma living in Ghent and who's a musician, he makes the program, and that has been a really important experience. So the statement, in a way, is that the offer, the program you make, is important if you want to reach out to different cultural communities.
Yes. Hello, my name is Nadin Deventer, and I'm the artistic director of the Jazz Fest Berlin, which is turning 60 next year. I'm not, okay? So as you can see, I'm not the founding director of Jazz Fest Berlin. This is impossible. But I'm its first female artistic director in that very long history. For 5 years, I have the big honor and pleasure to program that festival, that big established tank, let's say. And when I started there, I need to say that the Jazz Fest Berlin is part of a big cultural umbrella organization. It's called Berliner Festspiele. And we are organizing different festivals, theater festival, dance festivals, 3 music festivals. We are running a museum, the Gropiusbau in Berlin, maybe some of you know that, and a lot of side events. And being part of such a big umbrella organization means that you are in constant dialogue anyways already with your colleagues who are in charge of the other festival and other events. And I was just listening to Francesca and Wim, and that's also the reason why I didn't want to start first, because I wanted to see where the journey is bringing us and taking us to. And I'm giving you this background information because my situation is different. We are all representing different, we are all living in very different realities. It's a network sitting here, it's a venue sitting here, and I'm now a festival sitting here. And I initially, when they appointed me artistic director, I had a 3 years contract. And now I'm still in charge, and maybe also for 1 or 2 more years. And the big question then is, what are you going to do within 3 years' time? And I have been already involved as a production manager of the Jazz Fest Berlin, and I have pulled off a new series for the Berliner Festspiele for the 3 years before they made me artistic director of Jazz Fest Berlin. That's quite important to know, because it gives you a lot of background information and also has a big influence on how you might approach afterwards this big task of being in charge of the program of such a quite established festival. Maybe I continue with what Wim has said, or maybe I just fill you into my first thoughts when I saw this Jazz Fest Berlin, because we had a talk. I'm friends with Çağıl and Murat. They are also involved in the X Jazz Festival in Berlin, and I'm also living in Berlin. And only the fact that I'm sitting here now with you guys is fantastic and fabulous, and also maybe represents this new attitude that us as a community, and also maybe also being part of a new generation, are having, because the Jazz Fest Berlin is one of these very esteemed, very established festivals that are also a bit, that can also be a bit terrifying. And this festival is so different than the Bozcaada Jazz Festival, or also the X Jazz Festival in Berlin, and still I'm here. And why am I here? Because we are all belonging to the same big family, and we are part of the same community in Berlin or in Europe, being part of the Europe Jazz Network. We are all striving for the best, presenting music, supporting musicians, and also stimulating ourselves with these great other ideas and discussions we are all having, in order to find new ways and better ways of how to bring that music to different audiences, how to open our festivals or venues to audiences, and also music and musicians that might have been excluded. And when I took over the Jazz Fest, now I'm coming to my point. I see you, Ahmed. My question was, Jesus, what am I going to do for the next 3 years to come? Because I had serious doubts about that festival. It was a very traditionally curated festival, about 20 concerts on big stages. We have a big theater with 1,000 seats, and then some side stages included, and very prestigious openings, and so forth and so forth. And I realized when I started working at the Berliner Festspiele that my generation was not part of the audience, and the younger generation even less, and also that it was a very male-dominated enterprise. Musicians on stage were mostly male musicians, and also the audience was predominantly a male audience, and also that audience is a very loyal audience, and it grew with the time of the festival. So it got older and older and older. And there were other big questions that I had in mind and challenges ahead. I'm coming from the free scene, I need to say. I didn't grow up in the institutions, but I always challenged institutions with a lot of projects that I've been, that I've already been involved throughout the last 20 years in very different contexts. Not only festivals, not only music, European capitals of culture, theater festivals, whatsoever. And I realized very quickly, if I take over, there are big expectations, and also me, I had very big expectations. And then I took the decision, and I was very afraid to do it, but I did it, to just turn the whole festival upside down. So the first thing I decided was gender balance. It's not a 50-50 gender balance, but it had a really big part of musicians on stage are female musicians. That was for these festivals, it's already something. And also audiences, how to kind of attract new audiences, younger audiences, and also all of the rules, let's say, of how to make a festival, meaning you have esteemed big concerts on the big stages at prime time, let's say at 8 p.m., and then maybe before and after you have smaller concerts in clubs or on smaller venues where you have less audience and also less attention. And very often it's up and coming musicians. It's musicians that might, on a musical or artistic level, have a really high level of playing, but they automatically on these very established festivals very often are put on smaller stages because the audience didn't know them or still does not know them yet. And I thought, like, the Jazz Fest Berlin is such a strong brand in itself, it's so established. Why not give the bigger stages also automatically to more unknown artists and to other artists who really need that stage and that I'm totally convinced of, artistically speaking, and a fan of. And another thing that I was questioning is how to get involved the community in Berlin. I still experienced, when I started working at the festival, at the Berliner Festspiele, it's now some 10 years ago, that of course there was, I mean, the Berlin-based musicians and also in Germany-based musicians have hardly been involved in the Jazz Fest because it was an international festival with the big, more or less big international names. And of course also me, I thought that's a concept that is outdated. It's not okay anymore to think like this, and I'm coming from the free scene. I have always been involved in working together with communities, with artists, with other partners around me. I need that dialogue. I'm nothing doing by myself only. It's always in constant thinking together and shaping projects together and so forth. So for me, it was one of the most natural things to open the festival also towards the Berlin-based musicians community and also to make them a part of my program. We were thinking together and shaped together big parts of the program of the Jazz Fest Berlin. We have been bringing together the Berlin-based musicians with artists around the world, made them stay together in residence programs, and they were shaping together the most important projects for the festival, not the little side events, the big stage. I also remember just thinking about this, to give you an example, Jamie Branch, I don't know if all of you or some of you might know her. She passed away a few days ago. It's a very tragic loss for the jazz community. She is US American, and Jamie, in 2018, for my first festival edition, I put Jamie on the main stage, and that was her first appearance ever in Germany, and it was great. Her writing is different, she is so relevant, and then she became a really relevant voice internationally. She has been touring since then forever. She brought out a fantastic record, Fly or Die, and I was so thrilled. And then also shaping the festival, and then I'm finished. I'm thinking in themes and topics. I try to create a narrative. I need a narrative. I need some storylines to create a 4 days. It's only a 4 days festival. Some 40 activities, maybe 50. And there's so much going on in Berlin and in this music field that me, myself, in order to kind of really believe in my own festival and story. I kind of look for narrative strength, also how to communicate it afterwards. We have a lot of unknown artists involved in the Jazz Fest. I have been asked very often, who are the big names of the festival? There are more or less also some big names involved, but we are working with them in a different way. It's not the big names who we need anymore to sell tickets for the Jazz Fest Berlin. It's this community vibe. It's special projects. It's new commissions. It's it's working. The audience is coming along with us. It has been renewed a bit, and we didn't lose necessarily. Also, there was a clear, let's say, shift from one year to another when I took over, and also the whole marketing campaign, everything. The festival looked very differently. The program was very different. I opened the theater like not only ideologically speaking, but literally by getting Berlin-based musicians, a collective, Kim Collective, involved in really going into corners that are always locked to the audience, and to just play around with the whole house. We got visual artists involved, and to really create this open and very welcoming, cosmopolitan, very collaborative atmosphere. Voilà, I'm sorry, it's very much too much information maybe.
That's nice. So actually everybody has their own positions within these organizations, but it's not easy to remove who you are from what you're doing at the same time. So I can see that, when you're talking. So I have a question for Francesca, because Europe Jazz Network is funded by European Commission, and they're having the agenda for the culture, etc. And how does it help to create this intercultural dialogue in international level? Because there are many different organizations from international scene. And now we are talking about, of course, intercultural dialogue, and it doesn't have to be international level, but maybe it would be nice to see how it shapes our understanding and how we can kind of apply these understanding into our work at the same time.
So yes, Europe Jazz Network is co-funded and supported by the European Commission. So we have our is a big project. So I remember when I started working in EJN, it was 2013. There was already a support from the European Commission, but it was a smaller one. And I remember we were already starting talking about all these themes, topics like gender balance, social inclusion. That was just the beginning, because at that time the network was smaller, important, but smaller. I mean, I think when I started it was like around 60, 70 members. Now we are more than the double. And I saw that during the years, in 2014, we had the new project, our new project supported by the European Commission started. And we already wrote in this application some activity for the green, the sustainability, for social inclusion, and for gender balance, plus other topics. So we were looking ahead. We were anticipating what would have been the main current European Commission topics, because now they are the main European Commission topics. But in 2014, actually, also in the guidelines, they were not mentioning these topics. So it was the work of the board of directors, of the members. And this means that in the years, it came like naturally for the members to be more and more committed to these topics. While before the main thing they were interested in, and they are still interested in, was like the programming, and it's also fair. I mean, it's fair because they manage, they're the artistic director, so that should be their first concern. But at the same time, they wanted to really commit they wanted to improve the audience, they want to improve the inclusivity, because anyway, nobody is an island. It's a stupid thing, but we are all connected. And the more we connect ourselves, the more we share ideas, the more we exchange our experiences, the better it is for anyone. And so if you have seen, these are two different experiences between Wim and Nadine, but I think any of them can learn from each other, and it helps a lot. So during these years, we have been, as EJN, working on these topics, but also because our members are interested in them. If our members weren't interested in that, that would have been any sense to talk about this or write about this, because we as a network follow and create a narrative also according to what our members need and want to do. So if I say, okay, let's do as a network project and make a seminar and nobody of our members is interested, doesn't make sense. But we see that while one of the first seminars, it was 2015, was in Pantin, in France, where our office is based. I remember we were like 12, 14 members. This year in Barcelona, we were 30, and you were supposed to be there, by the way, but okay, unfortunately you got COVID. But we were more than 30, and people and our members were so inspired by that. So this means that the European Commission agenda, we follow it, but at the same time, I think they follow what the cultural sector does. So it's a mutual commitment, because they also understand that these topics, alongside which the sustainability and gender balance are important.
Can I just get into that? Because I think both the experience of the festival and the experience of the European Jazz Network show the importance of the responsibility a network takes towards the society, opening up teams which are important to society and which we link to the musical community. Same way as Nadine opens up her festival, giving a stage to local musicians, giving a stage to musicians which are usually not on main stages, but were always put away on marginal stages, let's say, is the dynamics that create. Because if you start that rhetoric towards those communities, as Nadine has done, it opens up your involvement in the local music scene, and they will respond to you. I will give you two examples on the same way as I've kind of opened up the Handelsbeurs towards these communities. Then it's not only your responsibility. The musicians themselves will come up with ideas because they know that your house is an open house and that it creates the dynamic. I told you this example. Well, there's two examples actually. There is an Iraqi musician living in Ghent. He plays kanun. He's a great composer, Osama Abdul Rasul, and it was his birthday, and I gave him a record of Flemish polyphonic music. And 1 year later, he came back to me and he says, I've listened to that record over and over again, and I want to do a project. Because the music, this Flemish polyphonic music, which is kind of medieval music, lots of different voices together, sounds to me as if it's connected to the Arabic classical music, which I grew up with. So he created a project with two singers and different instrumentalists connecting the Arabic classical music with the Flemish medieval polyphonic music, and also involving a DJ. It's a quite eclectical and probably also intellectual approach of music. And another example is very recently, actually, before I left, 3 musicians came up to me who are living in Ghent, an Iranian vocalist and dove player, the same Iraqi Osama, and a Turkish balama player and oud player, Mevlut. And they told me that they wanted to do a project on Rumi. Rumi, the Sufi mystic poet who is actually Persian by birth, but then moved to Turkey and Konya, and who installed this beautiful tradition of whirling dervishes. And the differences they have, because in Iran, the Persian tradition is much more austere. When they look at Rumi, they don't acknowledge the whirling dervishes and then this specific Sufism. They have a completely different adaptation of Rumi. And in Iraq, it's also different. And it's so beautiful that in the city of Ghent, these three musicians come together and talk about this and do this project in a city which has very little relation with Rumi as such. And I'm sure if they will talk about Rumi, because it's an incredible poet, that they will bring something along within the audience. And it's these things, it's opening up your venue or your festival or your network, creating a dynamic. It kind of, it creates a new dynamic, and it brings you forward. And I think that is also an important aspect of our work. You have to dare.
I'm coming back to what you said actually, because now we are on the 6th year of the festival, and last a couple of years we kind of decide on our advocacy areas, we would say, and one of them is ecological transformation, and other gender balance, and then accessibility. And I can say that it's, you know, mutual thing, but of course it's also popular within the, you know, context of, you know, culture and the industry itself, etc. So actually now I would like to come to the topic. While we're always talking about what we are producing or exporting, but of course we are also facing now some challenges, you know, when we talk about our identities and positions, and we need to claim, you know, some positions to be kind of, you know, one of the people who are talking about now we are here, so, you know, we are bringing these different topics and creating kind of a awareness so that people would think about it, etc. And I have a question for Nadine, because you said you were a production manager and you were actually coming from the, you know, free scene. And what were the challenges for you as a woman yourself, you know, to claim your position within the industry?
Oh, that's a big question. I mean, throughout my professional career, let's say, I have always been, I needed to do everything. Probably you guys are also doing this. I know what it means to initiate projects, festivals, big collaborations or whatsoever, to just have an idea and to kind of, or you walk around somewhere and then you feel the need of something else, change, or you identify necessities, criticisms, or opportunities, you know, and that for me was always the driving force in order to kind of get myself engaged. If I don't feel that I could contribute something or transform something or change it to the better, I'm not interested. I mean, this is really what drives me on, is this. I think what one of the qualities that all of us might have is really to kind of listen a lot, to ask a lot of questions. We also are so privileged, but also before I entered the Berliner Festspiele, I tried to travel, to see others. I'm so grateful to be here now, to see what you guys are doing and what others are doing within the community in Berlin, of course, but also then on the national and international level. And then you develop a feeling of what's really going on. And of course, you need to do your homework. You kind of need to try to follow as best as you can what's going on in the music field. And this overflow of information is just not, nobody can really handle this, you know. But you can get yourself informed by looking and talking to others within the networks, within your communities, but also to kind of really study a lot, listen a lot to new releases and stuff. And you were asking me what my challenge then was. So what I have been a curator, a project initiator, developer, and also a production manager throughout my whole life. I'm now working in this field for nearly 20 years. And I always needed to have several hats on because there was not enough money or no money at all. So I've been involved in no budget, in low budget, and in big budget projects. And very often I had this idea and I saw potential, an opportunity, and then I was kind of speaking and I tried to gather people then. I saw this, and on my trips another person, and then I was thinking if these two would know each other, or if this festival is such a prestigious big platform. I have been living for 6 years in the Ruhr area, and I have been living in 5 other different European cities. And also this gives you information, you know, if you come to a new place, you are a stranger, and you see you need to try to understand communities and how society is working in order to find your place and what you might be able to contribute at some point. And the challenge that I was facing basically when all of a sudden it happened, and Thomas Oberender, the former general director of Berliner Festspiele, made me artistic director of the Big Jazz Fest Berlin. For me, to be honest, it was kind of a shock because I knew what that might mean for others. In Germany, in Germany, the jazz field has been a lot in male hands, and that it was a certain generation of people, be it record label, founders of record labels, founders of venues, founders of festivals, journalists. It was a certain generation of a very male-dominated society. Also the musicians were very male-dominated. It's getting less and less. We still have more male musicians than female musicians, especially instrumentalists, but it's changing slowly by slowly. And us, society, all together, we need to change this. It's all about role models. I didn't have a role model, for instance. I was the first woman, and also there was this generation change that has been introduced by appointing me, because I'm representing a younger generation. I am socialized in a very, very different way than the older generation. Very often they found that one venue, or they were this founder of that record label or festival, and they could be developing and working in that field if that happened 30, 40, 50 years ago throughout their whole career. For us, this will never happen because of the political and social realities. We are living in a hardcore neoliberal system, meaning that we get project funding. If we are lucky from year to year to year. If we are not lucky, then it just stops. And you can influence this by creating a new project, a new festival, or whatsoever. But very often it has nothing to do with the quality that you are delivering or the relevance you are creating, the contribution you are giving to the community, to music, to culture. Very often it's a political or an economical decision. Also me now myself, as I told you, I have been appointed 3 years, now 1 year, maybe another year. It's not in my hands. What I can do is my best, my very best, to create relevance, to do the best job I can. Then it's others more or less deciding. And of course, for some of this jazz establishment in Germany, it was, and also Europe, more in Germany, right, Wim? It was a total shock. All of a sudden, there was this, who is she? She? And why haven't I been asked? I was the next in the row, you know? That was, I think, for a lot of male colleagues, and also that they didn't know anything about it. It just happened, and they read it out of a press release, and the reactions were sometimes really very rude, very heavy. It had to do with the fact that I'm a woman, but I think even more with the fact that they thought that I'm not qualified enough, because I am qualified in a different way. I have been involved in a European Capital of Culture. I have been involved in a theater meeting. I've been involved in a classical music festival. I have been a freelancer creating my own projects again and again in a constant competition, if you want to say, I mean, it is a competition about money, if you get funding or not, or if you kind of can convince other partners, festivals, museums, whoever, to believe in you and your ideas, and then to invest, to open doors and also invest money in the end, you know? That is my working reality, and this is why I have been living in different cities. I don't know for how long I will be living in Berlin, to be honest. I moved to Berlin for a 3 years contract, then I got another 3 years, you know, I don't know. And that's kind of, and also this remote working. These days you don't necessarily need to live in the city where you produce something. You guys are living in Berlin, in Istanbul, wherever, and you do this here. And it's perfectly doable, you know. There is a connection and you have a credibility and you do a great job, and it's, yeah, and this is something that happened in a very rough way before before we had my first before my first festival edition was there. There was already a public debate going on, but the public debate in the big magazines and weekly newspapers was more or less the question: why do these male elder colleagues and jazz guys react in such a rude way? There was one journalist like really openly saying what others were thinking behind closed doors, and he wrote it in his blog. He said, Nadine goes to Berlin. And then the other question was, can Nadine Berlin? Is Nadine capable to deal with Berlin? And his conclusion before anything happened, I didn't do any festival and nothing, was, if the former chancellor Helmut Schmidt would have known, he would just be it would have been so embarrassing. So these guys, for them, it was such a big cultural shock that that happened without them being involved and having a saying in this, and also because it is a very prestigious platform, the Jazz Festival. There are not so many of these platforms around in Europe, and of course, for me also, to be really honest, I was also very afraid. I was humble. I humbly took on that job. I was fighting to get that job. That is also a reality. It didn't happen like this. This one big call of our director didn't come out of the blue. I was already there for 3.5 years and helping and doing a good job for the institution. Otherwise, it would never have happened. And I felt also the pressure and the responsibility then on my shoulders. It was without these guys of Europe Jazz Network, to be really honest, because I at that point was board member of Europe Jazz Network and we met regularly. And I asked Wim and others if they would help me, to do this job, because I knew what might happen. And they all supported me and said, if ever you have a question, come, we are all there, we do this together, you know. And without a good network, be it on the local level or also internationally, I would have never taken on that job, because it's, you can really fall easily, you know, and as a human being, it's, as I already said in my introduction, you don't do these jobs alone. Yeah.
Maybe we can continue with Wim. We already mentioned what was difficult during COVID times, and you know, you're leading the artistic direction for the concert hall, so it's really important, and also we realized it's really important to be together and gathering, so we already felt about why we are coming together within the festivals and why we are doing this job, etc. And also these physical spaces is giving or providing the creating the space for different encounters at the same time. So what were the challenges for you during the COVID time to bring different backgrounds in this context of intercultural dialogue? Because it's also, I know you're working with different communities, and you know, how you handle, you know, without physical space to continue what you're doing, what you're working within the organization.
I think our main concern was to keep on involving musicians, because the musical community was completely left out. They had no job. Since there is no stage, there is no job, there is no audience, there is no, and it came so abrupt. All these people, all these musicians had new projects which they wanted to present, had made records which were on the shelves, ready to be presented to an audience and to the world. So what we almost immediately did was start up our own channel. We have a beautiful flat floor theater, and we turned it into a television studio. And we hired something which we had never done before, so we needed to also acquire that experience. We hired two film directors. One was a Syrian refugee, actually, who had come to Ghent and had a great experience in filming, had made some documentaries and music films, and another young guy. And then we hired a film team, and all those projects we had in our program who were going to be presented to an audience, we asked the musicians for the same fee to present them on stage without a live audience, but an online audience. And also all these projects we had with these communities, we did them in a different way, because one of the important things, and we're all hungry, so comes to my mind, is that when we did these projects with these communities, the kitchen is almost the most important place in your whole festival and in your whole project. People eat together. Usually in a regular concert, we don't start the concert with food, but in these festivals, when we have Istanbul Express, if we have Jamal Efna, the Maghreban or the Roman festival, we start with food. People come 2 hours earlier, they eat together, and then they go and see the music. Of course, all those things we could not do. So it was still a handicap. We invited the bands to play and present them on a digital way, but at the same time, we felt not doing what we wanted to do. And I think economically we paid our role towards those communities, which was really important. And also mentally, I remember there's a Syrian violin player who we invited, he was going mental, because he was a musician, and the musician was the only mission in his life. So giving him a task and making a video and performing and putting a project together, even without the money, was for him so important that he could reach out to a digital audience, was so important for him to survive. He said, I was going to be psychiatric. I did not know what I was in my apartment as a refugee. He doesn't have a really large community to depend on. And if the bonds are cut with an audience, we had this awareness. I think that was one of the biggest awarenesses we had. It's like, we have to reinstall, in what way possible, reinstall the link of the musician with the audience. And we did also face-to-faces and whatever which was possible. But it's a handicap. We work, same with EGN. I think we did an incredible, and especially the staff did an incredible job in keeping the membership together. Because if there is no live activities in different cities where we invite people to discuss, then your network is senseless, it's useless, it's dead. It's completely meaningless. And having that awareness, and of course we're living in a digital age, we had the possibilities. It costs money, and it costs a lot more energy than doing something live, but that was more or less that was the answer to it. And people were really thankful to that kind of solution.
Yeah, I remember actually when the COVID started, we started asking to each other how we are feeling. And since it's a COVID time, we were just, on Zoom screens and recording how we are feeling. And we are asking to each other within the team for Bozcaada Caz Festivali. Actually, it's a digital content now. And also we were asking people from the scene, friends and from the industry people. And actually, we realized that, just talking about how we are feeling only is something that we are also healing from. And now we are talking about the gatherings here and, you know, how important to be together, to, you know, get inspired, etc. And we all actually talk about getting inspirations because everybody has different stories about this experience, not only about COVID, but when we talk about the intercultural dialogue thing, you need space to discuss, you know, what you're feeling, because it's not something that you can think away from who you are at the same time. And that's why now, you know, we are here and you know, we have a theme every year, and this year's theme is healing, and it comes out from the COVID times actually, because, you know, and you said, you know, you ask EGM people to help you out, and because you need to be, or you need to feel the belonging somehow, because we are talking about communities, but you can't feel the, you know, you can't belong, or you can't feel this belonging to somewhere if you are not welcomed at the same time. So after this, you know, panel, I also think about the, you know, inspiration thing. And maybe you can also have, you know, you have some remarks about the inspiration under this theme and how, you know, there are examples that I'm also getting inspired by. And if you have something in mind, you know, about this topic, when you think about the intercultural, you know, examples, that is, you know, crucial for your career and also approach. Do you think anything else?
Just because we were just touching upon this COVID crisis. I just, and you were mentioning how to kind of, and Wim said it, and Europe Jazz Network, we all did it together. We met regularly once a week. Instead of, we needed to have a regular rhythm in order to stay in touch and also to kind of develop ideas together. I mean, we were all really thrown into a big crisis, like as human beings, at home with kids, homeschooling, home office. Nobody had a clue about how long this crisis would last, what it would all mean. And that was a really very helpful thing to kind of, just as Europe Jazz Network, we have more than 160 members from more than 30 countries in Europe and abroad. And that helps if you see colleagues, even though it's only these little Zoom windows, and everybody struggling and dealing with the same thing. How do you want to organize something in a time where nothing is predictable and you can't organize anything? I mean, and that helped a lot to kind of, and only to advise, also to advise each other. I remember in 2020 and also 21 that we were asking each other about the national regulations and what would happen, which artists still could travel or not, and how we would react. And we learned so much from each other. And the Jazz Fest is taking place in November each year, at the beginning of November, 4 days. And so we had a lot of time, let's say, more time than festivals taking place in March, April, May, or in summer. X-Jazz took place in May, and that was a nightmare because in March it hit us, this pandemic, and then you didn't have any time to do any. I mean, that was too fast, too whatever. But us, we had 8 months of learning and seeing also the others reacting and communicating with our musicians, with our partners. The program was ready, more or less, for that year, but then COVID hit and the whole thing kind of started to shivering around, and also at some point we knew, okay, this is it. What are we going to do? And as we are an institution receiving public money, also Wim's institution receives public money, you have a big duty in order to keep the music and the business going. This is what I decided very quickly. For me, it was not an option to give up, to just sit down and cancel the festival because it might only be digital. I really felt that duty to go on and on as long as possible. So what we did then throughout the 8 months is to more and more realize what the pandemic means. It was a big crisis on the human level. It was a big crisis of mobility. It was a big crisis of gathering, getting people together. So for any cultural operator, the end in a way. But then by the time running, we developed, as all of the others probably too, 20 scenarios throughout the 8 months starting in March, ending finally in November for the Jazz Fest in 2020. And in the end, what we did is there were these elections also in the United States, you know, and in 2020. And the elections took place only 2 days before the Jazz Fest started. And the Jazz Fest Berlin has a very strong intercontinental history also with the United States of America. It was one of the first big platforms in Europe that brought the American artists to Europe, and a lot of African American artists to Europe, jazz artists. And I was thinking, how can we get involved the American artists? So they will not be able to travel very probably. And all of the others are developing all of these digital formats. Lots of colleagues worked only with local musicians at home, and because we could learn, we then teamed up with a venue in New York, Brooklyn, New York, the Roulette, and we developed together within 4 months' time, and a lot of technicians. We created together a kind of digital bridge between New York, Berlin, having only Berlin-based musicians in Berlin, New York-based musicians in New York, and they played ping pong with each other. And that in lifetime. I mean, the Jazz Fest finally took place at the 3rd day of the 2nd lockdown in Germany, so no audience was allowed at all. We still hope that we might have had some audience in Berlin and in New York. In New York, musicians stood on stage at 10 a.m. and in Berlin at 6 p.m. And on top of this, we also created together with our radio partners, we have all of these different national radio channels involved in the Jazz Fest Berlin. It's 10 cities, each region, it's a federal state, Germany, and each region has its own national radio department. So we also were having these regular crisis meetings with them, and we developed together this idea of pulling in a digital way concerts from the whole of Germany, from the north to the south, by including local musicians being physically present and playing in their local radio studio, filming it. And then we pulled all of this content together. We also teamed up with Savvy Contemporary, a very important initiative in Berlin. And we had a big project with 10 concerts going on there. And together with Arte Concert, we pulled together this content. It was a, technically speaking, really crazy enterprise. And we had 4 days, including 40 projects, like including concerts, live concerts. A lot of them were live played in New York, in Cologne, in Munich, in Hamburg, in Berlin, and we switched there. At the end, we had more than, I think we had 30 hours of streaming internationally, and thanks to Arte Concert, which is this French-German television and concert, they are very much engaged in the internet online for music. We had a big platform and really potent colleagues who were able to do all of this, and we got a big grant also. We had public money in order to do all of this, pulling together content from different communities, and I will never forget that. And the year after, we decided to, last year it was the year 21, and for us it was the 2nd year of a worldwide pandemic. No matter what happened in Germany, in Europe, or wherever, if we just remember, then we had access to vaccinations that wasn't there in 2020 at all, but lots of other parts in the world didn't. And we learned this new technology of streaming and also intercontinental connections in a really high concert quality visually and also acoustically. And then we decided as the Jazz Fest Berlin team, let's kind of go a step further and team up with colleagues, musicians in parts of the world that are really still facing one of their biggest crises ever due to COVID. And we teamed up with Sao Paulo in Brazil, with Cairo in Egypt, and with Johannesburg in South Africa. We knew some of these colleagues, but not really. So I called again some colleagues from the Europe Jazz Network. Do you have any contacts in Johannesburg? What about in Cairo? I knew a musician that I that just who wanted to move to Berlin. Maurice Luca, a really fantastic improviser. So he was my contact. And for Sao Paulo, I reached out to some musicians who already played at the Jazz Fest, and we were thinking who might be good partners in order to come up with ideas, again, to how to get involved the communities in these 3 cities, which musicians, and to create something that might be live on the other side of the world, and in Berlin, and going up and down, or also pre-produced. We also learned of how to create like nice interdisciplinary artworks, and the results were very different. The dialogues were intense. We started the dialogue in June, and the festival took place in November. And as Wim also said, you gave your key away to others, to other curators. In a way, we didn't really give it away, but of course we were co-curating, co-shaping again with musicians and colleagues on the other side of the world, only by teaming up digitally. I've never met them. Maybe I will never physically meet them. And that was possible thanks because we as an institution are on the budget side. We have that budget to do so, and the government gave us this Neustadt Kultur money, the new start of culture in Germany. And with that extra money, you could experience then, and still again pulling together and bringing together different communities. And in 2021, last year, there was audience everywhere because it was possible. And so the audience in Johannesburg got to know the audience in Berlin. There were screens everywhere. And not everything worked perfectly well, but we played ping pong. It's only 1 hour different, Joburg and Berlin. We did that for 2 nights, and the audience on both sides, they got along with it because they had a live band in Johannesburg, from Johannesburg, and then some streamed concert from Berlin, and vice versa. Yeah, voilà.
I will be short about inspiration. What was the original question about?
Yeah, I mean, you also talk about the award for social inclusion within the network, for instance. So you know, different perspectives and best practices, or something that has impact on. So something.
Yes. So, I mean, we get as a staff. So we are 3 from the staff. We get inspiration and we learn a lot from what our members do. And when we write the project, which will involve all EJN members, so we take inspiration, we see what they do, we see what they would like to improve. So we also adapt our future projects to what it is needed within the network. And regarding social inclusion, we understood that it was important to give this topic the right importance, like gender balance. I mean, we understood that this was an issue because society has changed a lot and these topics cannot be ignored anymore. So that's why more and more we propose new projects, new activities for the members. And we have seen these beautiful examples. Like we have been to Nadin's festival last year, and it was amazing to see this was a new idea. I mean, probably someone else had done it before, but this, having the screens, connections with intercontinental countries, was really, really nice. So, some of our members can take inspiration from this, but also as EJN, we can take inspiration from that. So it's, it's kind of mutual again. We take inspiration from our members, and we give inspiration to members. So the thing is that we have I think people just have to be a little bit humble and go around and learn and listen. And like I'm here, for example, I don't program concerts now. I mean, before I was in the theater, also programming festivals. But currently I don't organize concerts, but I go and see, and then when I go back, I think with my colleagues as well, okay, so they are doing this, they are doing a great job, so they could be, it could be interesting to involve, for example, Bozcaada Caz Festival to this activity or to speak at this panel. Because also when you organize conferences or working groups or seminars, you need the right people to moderate the panels or to chair the working groups or to make a keynote speech. And it's important that you find a right person. So going around, see, learn. So that's it.
No, I just wanted to say, because we have to stop, I think, no? No, because your theme of the festival this year is healing. I think this is really important, because what also happened was during 2 years, what I was telling, the musicians felt that they were meaningless and they had no view of the ending of this pandemic. So they felt like, okay, they've been taken away everything, their sense of life in a way. And then in March 2022, well, maybe not all of a sudden, but at a certain moment, the world opens up again. And since they had been deprived of playing music, they accepted every gig possible. So they were going all in overdrive. Musicians went bananas, and we've never seen so many burnouts within the music scene as ever before. So that healing aspect, actually just before I left, I was approached by an organization which is organizing a seminar on that topic, having musicians and artists come together and touch base again. And I paid for one musician to go there because I know she's struggling, and this is an important aspect. It's also an aspect as we as organizers should be, because we were very greedy. Like, okay, we thought, like, okay, they have to play, and we made them play everywhere. Sometimes they played for no money because they wanted to express themselves. And at a certain moment, you saw that they were just collapsing because they could not cope with this. After 2 years being nobody, all of a sudden they had to be everywhere. So this healing aspect is a really important issue, which we should keep in mind.
Thank you so much for your comments. Maybe we have some questions from the audience? No? Finished, okay. Okay. Thank you.